he drew her face every night before they ever met. Daniel Mercer had drawn the same woman for 11 years. He had never met her. That was the part he could never explain without sounding insane. Every night, usually sometime after midnight, Daniel sat alone at the wooden desk beside his apartment window in Portland, Oregon, opened a sketchbook, and drew her face. Sometimes he drew her smiling. Sometimes she looked tired. Sometimes there were tears in her eyes. Once, when Daniel was 27, he drew her with a small silver scar just beneath her left eyebrow. He didn't know why. He only knew that when he woke the next morning, his hand hurt from gripping the pencil too tightly. And tonight, at 32, Daniel drew her again. The apartment was quiet, except for the rain tapping against the glass. Beyond the window, Portland glowed in wet reflections of traffic lights and storefronts. A late bus moved through the intersection below, its windows shining like little rectangles of gold. Daniel leaned closer to the paper. The woman's face was almost complete. Dark shoulder-length hair, soft hazel eyes, a small curve in her nose, a faint dimple on her right cheek. He had drawn those features hundreds of times, but tonight something was different. He stopped. His pencil hovered above the paper. There was something in her expression that frightened him. Not sadness, not anger, recognition. She looked as though she was staring directly at him. Daniel slowly lowered the pencil. "No," he whispered. He pushed the sketchbook away. For years, he had treated the drawings as an unexplained part of his life. A strange habit that began after his mother's death. Doctors had called them grief. His therapist had called them a coping mechanism. His friends had called them a weird obsession. Daniel had accepted all of those explanations because the alternative was too frightening. The drawings always appeared in his dreams first. A face, a woman, a feeling that he knew her. Then, sometime during the night, he would wake with the overwhelming need to draw. He never remembered seeing the woman's face anywhere. Not in movies, not in photographs, not in magazines. She simply existed in his mind. And every few months, the drawing changed. A different hairstyle, a different expression, a different jacket, a different location behind her. But the face remained the same. Tonight, however, Daniel noticed something he had never seen before. There was a tiny mark on the woman's neck, a crescent-shaped birthmark. Daniel's breath caught. He hadn't drawn it deliberately. His hand had simply put it there. He stared at the mark. Then his phone rang. Daniel nearly knocked the sketchbook onto the floor. The screen showed an unknown number. He stared at it. No one called him this late. The phone rang again. He answered. "Hello." Silence. Daniel stood up. "Hello." A woman's breathing came through the speaker. Slow, unsteady. Then a voice whispered, "Daniel." Every muscle in his body tightened. He didn't recognize the voice, but somehow He recognized the fear in it. "Who is this?" The woman didn't answer immediately. Then she said something that made Daniel's stomach drop. "I think you drew me." The room seemed to become completely still. Daniel looked at the sketchbook. The woman in the drawing stared back at him. "Who are you?" he asked. "I don't know how to explain this." "Try. I found something tonight." Daniel's fingers tightened around the phone. "What?" "A drawing." His heartbeat became louder. "What kind of drawing?" There was a long silence. "Your drawing." Daniel's eyes moved toward the sketchbook again. The woman on the paper had hazel eyes, the same hazel eyes belonging to the woman on the phone. "Where did you get it?" "I found it in my mother's things." Daniel stopped breathing for a second. "What did you say?" "My mother died 6 years ago." Daniel closed his eyes. He suddenly remembered his own mother. The hospital room, the smell of disinfectant, her fingers wrapped around his wrist, the strange final sentence she had whispered to him before she died. "Don't let her find you." At the time, Daniel had assumed she was confused. He had spent 11 years trying to forget those words. Now they came rushing back with terrifying clarity. "What's your name?" he asked. The woman hesitated. "Emma." Daniel swallowed. "Emma what?" "Emma Carter." He sat down slowly. His hand was shaking. On the desk, beneath the sketchbook, was an old photograph Daniel had kept since childhood. His mother stood in the picture, beside another woman. Daniel had never known who she was. He had asked once. His mother had torn the photograph in half. Daniel had kept the surviving piece anyway. Tonight, for the first time in his life, he noticed something. The woman standing beside his mother had hazel eyes, the same hazel eyes. "Daniel." He looked toward the phone. "Yes." "Are you still there?" "Yes." "I need to ask you something." "What?" "Why have you been drawing me?" Daniel looked at the sketchbook. He wanted to tell her the truth, that he had been drawing her before he knew her name, before he knew her voice, before he knew she existed. But there was something else, something he had never told anyone. For the last 3 years, the drawings had changed. They no longer showed Emma alone. They showed Daniel standing beside her. And in every drawing, there was a third figure in the background, a man whose face Daniel had never been able to finish, a man who was always getting closer. Daniel's voice became barely audible. "I don't know." Emma breathed shakily. "Then maybe you should know something." "What?" "I found your first drawing of me." Daniel's eyes widened. "That's impossible. It was dated." "When?" Emma's voice trembled. "August 14th, 2015. Daniel looked at the wall. The clock read 12:17 a.m. His skin went cold, because August 14th, 2015 was the night his mother died. The night Daniel had drawn the woman for the very first time. And suddenly, the old memory he had spent 11 years burying returned. His mother lying in that hospital bed, her eyes full of terror, her hand gripping his wrist. And those final words, "Don't let her find you." Daniel whispered, "Emma." "Yes, where are you?" She gave him an address. Daniel wrote it down. Then Emma said, "There's one more thing." "What?" "The drawing you made tonight." Daniel stared at the sketchbook. "Yes, I think you need to look behind me." He frowned. "What do you mean?" "In the drawing." Daniel slowly turned the page toward himself. He hadn't noticed it before. Behind Emma, almost hidden in the darkness of the background, was a blurred figure. A man standing beneath a streetlight. Daniel's pencil had somehow captured the outline of his face. This time, unlike all the other drawings, the face was not unfinished. Daniel recognized him immediately. His blood turned cold because the man in the drawing was his father, and Daniel's father had been dead for 19 years. Daniel stared at the drawing. The woman was there, Emma, and behind her stood a man. At first, Daniel couldn't make sense of the shape. Then the pencil lines sharpened in his mind. The jaw, the crooked nose, the deep line beside the mouth. His father's face. Daniel's chair scraped backward. "No." The word came out before he could stop it. Emma heard him. "What is it?" Daniel couldn't answer. His father had been dead for 19 years. He had watched the casket lowered into the ground when he was 13. He remembered the rain that day. He remembered his mother's hand squeezing his so tightly that her fingernails dug into his palm. And he remembered something else, something he had never told anyone. 3 nights before his father died, Daniel had heard his parents arguing downstairs. He had crept halfway down the staircase. His father had been shouting. His mother had been crying. Then his father had said one sentence Daniel had never forgotten. "She'll find him eventually." His mother had answered, "Not if you leave us alone." Daniel had never understood who they were talking about. He hadn't wanted to understand. 3 days later, his father was dead. The official story was an accident on a mountain road. Daniel's mother never believed it. Neither had Daniel. But after his father's funeral, his mother had made him promise something. Never draw that girl again. Daniel had stared at her in confusion. What girl? His mother had looked at the sketchbook in his hands. The very first drawing. A face he had never seen. A face he had somehow drawn perfectly. His mother had started crying. "Promise me." Daniel had promised. He was 13. He had no idea what the promise meant, but he remembered what happened afterward. His mother burned every photograph she could find. She threw away old letters. She changed their phone number. She moved them to another town. And whenever Daniel asked why, she gave him the same answer. Some people are safer as strangers. For years, Daniel had believed she meant his father. Tonight, he finally understood. She had meant Emma. "Daniel." Emma's voice pulled him back. "Who is that man?" Daniel couldn't breathe. "You said you found my drawing." "I did." "Where?" mother's attic. Daniel's hands began to tremble. Emma, listen to me. I'm listening. If you found that drawing, you need to leave. Leave where? Anywhere. There was silence. Then Emma asked softly, why? Because Daniel knew the answer. Because he had spent 19 years pretending he didn't. Because his mother had died, believing she had protected him. And because every time he had drawn Emma, some part of him had felt the same terror he had felt as a child, standing outside his parents' bedroom door. Someone was coming. Someone who knew where they lived. Someone who wanted something from them. Daniel looked at Emma's face on the paper. His voice cracked. My mother was terrified of you. Emma went silent. What? My mother knew your name. How? I don't know. Daniel swallowed. But she knew you before I did. Another silence. Then Emma whispered, Daniel, my mother knew your mother too. His entire body went still. What did you say? I found letters. What kind of letters? Letters between them. Daniel looked at the old photograph on his desk. Two women. His mother, and the woman he now knew was Emma's mother. His stomach twisted. What do the letters say? Emma hesitated. I haven't read all of them. Read them. I don't think you want me to. Emma. His voice had changed. There was something desperate in it now. Please. She took a breath. The first letter says your mother believed someone was watching your family. Daniel closed his eyes. The second says she was afraid they would find you. His fingers tightened around the phone. And the third. Emma stopped. What does the third say? I think you should sit down. I'm already sitting. Then don't move. Daniel's heart hammered. What does it say? Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. It says that the girl you kept drawing wasn't supposed to exist. Daniel stared at the woman's face. Then Emma continued. And there's a name. What name? A pause. Your father's. Daniel's blood ran cold. That's impossible. I know. No, you don't understand. I think I do. No, Emma. Daniel looked toward the window. Across the street, beneath a flickering streetlight, someone was standing in the rain. A man, watching his apartment. Daniel's voice disappeared. Emma heard the silence. Daniel. He didn't answer. Daniel, what's happening? His eyes remained fixed on the figure. Then the man slowly lifted his head. Daniel stepped away from the window, because even from across the street, he knew that face. It was the same face he had been drawing for 11 years. The face of a man who was supposed to be dead. And for the first time, Daniel understood what had truly frightened him about the drawings. They had never been predicting the future. They had been warning him about someone who was already there. Someone who had been waiting for Emma to find him. Someone his mother had spent her entire life trying to keep away. And Daniel had just given that person exactly what he wanted. Emma. He drew her face every night before they ever met. Daniel didn't move. for several seconds. He simply stood beside the window, with the phone pressed against his ear, staring at the man across the street. Rain ran down the glass between them. The figure stood beneath the streetlight, with his hands in the pockets of a dark coat. Daniel couldn't see every detail. He didn't need to. He knew that face. He had seen it in old photographs. He had seen it in his dreams. He had seen it in the drawings. His father, Michael Mercer, a man who had been dead since Daniel was 13. Daniel, Emma said. He forced himself to breathe. Yes, you stopped talking. I'm here. What's happening? Daniel glanced at the sketchbook. The drawing showed the same man standing behind Emma. But now Daniel noticed something else. The background wasn't random. He could see the outline of a street, a brick building, a narrow staircase, and above the doorway, barely visible beneath the pencil shading, were 3 letters: M-R-C. Daniel's stomach tightened. He knew that place. Everyone in Portland knew it. The Morrison Row Community Center had been closed for almost 20 years after a fire destroyed part of the building. It was also the last place Daniel had ever seen his father before the police told him Michael had died. Daniel looked back across the street. The figure was gone. His heart slammed against his ribs. Emma, I'm here. Where are you right now? She gave him the address again. Daniel grabbed his jacket. Don't leave. What? Don't leave wherever you are. Why? Because I think someone is watching you. Silence. Then Emma whispered, I think you're right. Daniel froze. What did you see? I don't know. Emma, I've been sitting in my car for 20 minutes. Why? Because there was a man standing outside my apartment. Daniel's grip tightened around the phone. Did you see his face? No. How long was he there? I don't know. Maybe 10 minutes. Did he approach you? No. Then why did you leave? Because he was standing beside my mother's old car. Daniel stopped. Your mother's car. She died 6 years ago. I kept the car. What kind? A dark blue Ford. Daniel closed his eyes. A memory surfaced. His mother sitting behind the wheel of the same kind of car. Daniel was 13. His father was standing in the driveway. His mother was screaming at him, and Michael was holding something in his hand. A photograph. Daniel had never understood why his father tore it apart. Now he wondered if it had been the photograph on his desk. Emma, listen carefully. I'm listening. If you have your mother's car, check the glove compartment. I already did. Check again. Why? Because my mother kept something there. Emma went quiet. How would you know that? Daniel looked at the old photograph. Because my mother and yours knew each other. You said that. I think they were hiding something. Something about us. Daniel swallowed. Yes. A soft click came through the phone. What was that? Daniel asked. The glove compartment. Emma's voice had changed. There's an envelope. Daniel's skin prickled. What does it say? Nothing. Open it. I don't know if I should. Emma. She tore the envelope open. Daniel could hear the paper moving. Then silence. What is it? A photograph. Of who? I don't know. Describe it. It's two women. Daniel's breath caught. My mother. I think so. And the other woman. My mother. Daniel closed his eyes. The photograph they had both been searching for. What's behind them? Emma didn't answer. Emma, I'm looking. Her breathing became faster. There's a building. Daniel's heart began pounding. What building? I don't know. Look at the sign. Another pause. Then Emma whispered, Morrison Row. Daniel sat down. The room seemed to tilt around him. The same place. The same building. The same initials from his drawing. There's writing on the back, Emma said. What does it say? Her voice became shaky. It says, if anything happens to us, take the girls to Morrison Row. Daniel's eyes widened. The girls. That's what it says. Emma, what? How old were you when your mother died? 26. And before that? I don't understand. Did she ever tell you about a boy named Daniel? Emma didn't answer. That silence was enough. Daniel stood. Emma, I remember something. What? My mother used to talk about a boy. Daniel's throat tightened. What did she say? She called him Danny. Daniel felt the room disappear around him. Nobody had called him Danny since he was 13. Not even his mother during her final years. He had buried that name with his childhood. She said he was supposed to protect me. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He looked down at his hands. For the first time, he remembered something his mother had told him after his father's funeral. Not the promise, something else. You have to protect the girl. He had thought she meant a child at the hospital, a neighbor, anyone. He had been too young to understand. Now he understood. His mother had been talking about Emma. I think I knew you, Daniel whispered. Emma's voice softened. But we never met. I know. Then how? I don't know. Daniel. He heard something in her voice. Not fear this time. Hope. And that frightened him more than anything. Because hope was dangerous. Hope made people step closer to things they should run from. Daniel walked toward the desk. He picked up the first drawing he had ever made. The paper was yellowed with age. A 13-year-old's pencil lines. A woman's face. Emma. He had drawn her on the night his father died. But something else was written beneath the picture. Daniel had never noticed it before. 4 words. His mother's handwriting. Find her when you're ready. His hands began to shake. Emma. Yes. I found something. What? My mother left me a message. What does it say? Daniel stared at the words. Then he heard a sound outside. 3 knocks. Slow. Deliberate. His body went rigid. Knock. Knock, knock. Someone was at his apartment door. Emma heard it too. Daniel. He didn't answer. Daniel, what happened? He lowered the phone. Every instinct told him not to move. The knocking came again, 3 times. Then a man's voice came through the door. Daniel. His blood turned to ice. It was his father's voice, exactly as he remembered it. Older, rougher, but unmistakable. Daniel backed away. No, the voice came again. You've been looking for me. Daniel's eyes moved to the drawing. The unfinished figure. The man behind Emma. The man who had haunted every page for 3 years. Except now, his face wasn't unfinished. Daniel finally understood why. He hadn't been unable to draw the man's face. He had been afraid to finish it, because some part of him had always known who it was. His father spoke from the other side of the door. Open it, Danny. Daniel's hand covered his mouth. Nobody had called him Danny in 19 years. Then his phone vibrated. Emma had sent a message. Just 3 words. He's here too. Daniel looked at the screen. Another message appeared. And he knows my name. Daniel slowly raised his eyes toward the apartment door. The handle began to turn. He drew her face every night before they ever met. The door handle moved. Slowly, Daniel stared at it, unable to breathe. The lock clicked. He had locked it himself. He remembered doing it less than an hour ago. Yet the handle continued turning. Daniel, the voice outside said. His father's voice. Open the door. Daniel backed away until his shoulders touched the wall. His phone was still in his hand. Emma was calling. He answered without taking his eyes from the door. Don't talk, he whispered. Daniel, I can hear you breathing. Where are you? I'm still in the car. Good, stay there. Who was at your door? Daniel swallowed. My father. Silence. Then Emma whispered, Your father is dead. I know. You said he died 19 years ago. I know. Then who is outside? Daniel didn't have an answer. The handle stopped moving. For several seconds, there was nothing. Then 3 soft knocks. Knock, knock, knock. Daniel's stomach tightened. His mother had once told him that if someone knocked 3 times after midnight, he was never supposed to answer. He had thought it was one of those strange rules adults made to frighten children. Now he remembered something else. She hadn't been trying to scare him. She had been trying to protect him. Daniel, the voice said. He didn't move. You don't have to be afraid of me. Daniel almost laughed. The sound caught in his throat. That was exactly what someone dangerous would say. Then the voice became softer. I know what your mother told you. Daniel's blood ran cold. What did she tell you? No answer. Daniel stepped toward the door. What did she tell you? The man outside sighed. She told you I killed your father. Daniel froze. His heart seemed to stop. He had never told anyone that. Not the police. Not his therapist. Not even Emma. because his mother had never actually said it. She had only looked at him after Michael's death and whispered, "Your father is not the man you think he is." Daniel had spent 19 years wondering what she meant. Now someone outside his apartment seemed to know the exact words she had used. "Who are you?" Daniel asked. The voice answered immediately. "You know who I am." Daniel looked at the sketchbook. "No, you've been drawing me for 11 years. Daniel's eyes widened. "What? You thought you were drawing her?" A cold sensation moved through his chest. "But you weren't." Daniel looked down at the latest drawing. Emma's face, the dark street behind her, the man beneath the streetlight. His father, except something was wrong. The man's eyes weren't looking at Emma. They were looking directly at Daniel. Daniel slowly turned the page. Another drawing. Emma sitting in a coffee shop. The man in the reflection of the window. Another. Emma walking through a park. The man standing behind a tree. Another. Emma sleeping. The man standing outside her bedroom. Daniel's hands began shaking. He had always believed the drawings were about Emma. What if they had never been? What if Emma was simply the person standing closest to the danger? The door handle moved again. "Daniel," the voice said, "you need to listen to me." Daniel stepped backward. "Why?" "Because your mother lied to you." "About what?" "About your father." Daniel's jaw tightened. "My father died." "Yes, you watched him die." The man outside didn't answer. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "You weren't there, were you?" Silence. Then the voice said, "No." Daniel's heart pounded. "Then how do you know him?" Another pause. "Because I was the one who helped him disappear." Daniel felt dizzy. Disappear. He didn't die. The room seemed to become impossibly quiet. Daniel stared at the door. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying your father is alive." Daniel's knees weakened. He grabbed the edge of the desk. "No, I know you don't want to believe me. You expect me to believe that after 19 years. No, then why tell me? Because tonight, for the first time, you're in danger." Daniel looked toward the window. The street below was empty. "Who are you?" "I told you." "No, you sound like him." The man laughed softly. It wasn't his father's laugh. Daniel knew that immediately. "That's because I knew him very well." Daniel's phone buzzed. A message from Emma. "Daniel, I found another envelope." He typed quickly. "Don't open it." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. "Why?" Daniel looked at the door. "Because whoever is outside knows about it." Emma replied almost instantly. "He already has." Daniel stared at the message. "What do you mean?" Her reply came. "Someone just walked up to my car." Daniel's heart dropped. Emma locked the doors. "They're locked." "Start the engine." "I did." "Drive." "I can't." "Why?" A few seconds passed. Then, there's someone sitting in the passenger seat. Daniel's blood turned cold. He could hear Emma breathing through the phone. "Don't look at him." "I already did." "What does he look like?" She didn't answer. "Zama." Her voice was barely audible. "He looks like you." Daniel stopped breathing. "What?" "He looks exactly like you." The call went silent. "Zama." "Nothing." "Zama." The line remained connected. Daniel could hear movement. Then a man's voice. Not his father's. Not the voice outside his door. A voice Daniel recognized from somewhere deeper. A voice from his dreams. "Hello, Danny." Daniel dropped the phone. The voice came from the speaker on the floor. "Your mother should have told you everything." Daniel stared at the phone. "Who are you?" The voice laughed. "You really don't remember me." Daniel's mind raced. He remembered his childhood, the old house, his father, his mother, the locked basement door, the nights when someone would come to the house after midnight, a man's footsteps on the stairs, a voice whispering through the walls. "Danny, don't tell your mother I'm here." Daniel's face went pale. He remembered. Not everything, just enough. There had been another man, a man who used to visit their house when Daniel was little, a man his father trusted, a man his mother hated. Daniel whispered a name he hadn't spoken since childhood. "Thomas." The voice on the phone became silent. Then the man outside his apartment said, "Now you remember." Daniel turned toward the door. His father's voice was gone. The voice outside was different. Older, calmer. "Thomas." Daniel backed away. "Where's my father?" The man outside answered. "That's the question your mother spent 19 years trying to keep you from asking." "Where is he?" "You'll find him at Morrison Row." Daniel looked at the drawing. The abandoned community center. The place where everything seemed to begin. The man continued, "But you won't find him alone." Daniel's phone suddenly went dead. The apartment lights flickered. Once, twice, then everything went dark. Daniel stood frozen in the silence. From somewhere inside the apartment came a faint sound. Paper moving. He slowly turned. His sketchbook was open on the desk. He hadn't left it open. A fresh page was visible, and on that page was a drawing he had never made. A little boy stood beside a woman. The boy was Daniel. The woman was his mother. Behind them stood his father, and between his parents was another man, Thomas. But the terrifying part wasn't the drawing. It was the date written underneath it. August 14, 2007. Daniel stared at the page. His father's supposed date of death was August 14, 2007. The date of the accident. The date Daniel had spent half his life believing he became an orphan. But beneath the date, in his mother's handwriting, were 6 words. "He didn't die that night, Daniel." Daniel's breath caught. Then another sentence appeared beneath it, not written in his mother's handwriting, written in fresh black ink. "He came looking for you." He drew her face every night before they ever met. Daniel stared at the sentence on the page. He came looking for you. His hands were shaking. For 19 years, he had believed his father died on a wet August night on a mountain road outside Portland. The police had found the wreckage. They had found Michael's wallet. They had found his wedding ring. They had found enough blood to convince everyone that there had been no chance of survival. But they had never found his body. Daniel suddenly understood why his mother had never visited a grave. There had never been one. A sound came from the hallway. Daniel looked up. Thomas. Nothing. He moved toward the door. The apartment was dark. Why are you doing this? Thomas answered from the other side. Because you deserve the truth. Daniel almost laughed. You've spent 19 years hiding it. I was protecting you. That's what everyone says when they lie. Silence. Then Thomas said quietly, Your mother said the same thing. Daniel's chest tightened. Don't talk about my mother. She loved you. I know. More than anyone. Then why did she lie to me? Because she was afraid. Of you. No. Thomas paused. Of what your father had done. Daniel froze. What did my father do? Thomas didn't answer immediately. Instead, he said, Do you remember the summer before he died? Daniel closed his eyes. A house in the suburbs. His mother's garden. His father's old blue truck. A little girl sitting on the front porch. Daniel's eyes opened. A little girl. He remembered her. Barely. She had dark hair, hazel eyes, and a yellow dress. Daniel had thought she was a neighbor's daughter. Who was she? Thomas's voice softened. You know. Daniel shook his head. No. You've been drawing her face for 11 years. Daniel looked at the sketchbook. Emma, the little girl from his memory. How old was she? 8. Daniel's breath caught. Emma had been 26 when her mother died 6 years ago. The numbers fit. Daniel had been 13. Emma had been 8. They had been children in the same house. The same summer. The same memory. But Daniel couldn't remember meeting her. Why can't I remember her? Because your mother made sure you couldn't. Daniel's stomach turned. How? She took you away. From her. From everyone. Daniel stared at the door. Why? Thomas's voice became quieter. Because your father had discovered who Emma really was. Who was she? Thomas didn't answer. Daniel's frustration exploded. Who is she? She's not the person your mother told you she was. Daniel stepped backward. What does that mean? It means Emma wasn't supposed to be raised by her mother. Daniel felt cold. Then who was she supposed to be with? Thomas finally answered. Your father. Daniel stared at the door. No. Michael believed he had a responsibility to her. Why? Because he was her biological father. Daniel stopped breathing. The words seemed to hang in the darkness. Emma, his father, his mother, the photograph, the drawings, everything suddenly seemed connected. But one question remained. Then why did my mother hate her? She didn't. Thomas's answer came immediately. She loved Emma. Daniel frowned. Then why did she keep her away from me? Because she was afraid you'd remember. Remember what? That you promised to protect her. Daniel's heart tightened. A memory flashed. A little girl crying behind the house. Daniel holding her hand. Someone shouting inside. His mother running toward them. His father screaming. Thomas standing near the gate. Then darkness. Daniel pressed his fingers against his temple. I remember. Thomas said nothing. I remember the girl. His voice broke. I told her I'd find her. Yes, I promised. Yes. Daniel's eyes filled with tears. And then my mother took me away. Because Michael wanted to expose the truth. What truth? Thomas sighed. The truth about what happened to Emma's father. Daniel stared into the darkness. Who was Emma's father? Michael. Daniel felt sick. You just said that. No. Thomas's voice changed. Michael was not Emma's father. Daniel went completely still. Then who was? Thomas whispered. May. The apartment seemed to lose all sound. Daniel's mouth opened. Nothing came out. Thomas continued. I was Emma's biological father. Daniel looked at the drawing. The little girl. The woman. The man behind them. Everything shifted. His father hadn't been protecting Emma from Thomas. Thomas had been hiding Emma from everyone. Why? Because your mother found out. Daniel's voice was barely audible. My mother knew. She knew everything. Then why didn't she tell me? Because Michael begged her not to. Why? Because if the truth came out, Emma would have been taken away. By who? Thomas didn't answer. Daniel understood. Authorities. Yes, because of you. Because of what I had done. Daniel stared at the door. What did you do? Thomas's silence lasted so long that Daniel thought he had left. Then he heard the answer. I wasn't supposed to have contact with Emma. Daniel's stomach tightened. Why? Because I had already lost custody of another child. Daniel's face changed. Thomas continued. Your father discovered everything. He threatened to expose me. So you killed him. No. The answer was immediate. I didn't kill Michael. Then what happened? Michael disappeared because he wanted to protect Emma. Daniel looked at the sketchbook. And you. I spent 19 years trying to find him. Daniel shook his head. You said you knew where he was. I said you'll find him at Morrison Row. Is he alive? Thomas didn't answer. Daniel's voice became desperate. Is my father alive? A long pause. Then Thomas said, Yes. Daniel closed his eyes. A tear escaped. For 19 years, he had mourned a man who might still be breathing. For 19 years, he had believed his mother had abandoned the truth. For 19 years, he had carried a fear he couldn't name. And now there was something worse. If Michael was alive, Why had he never come back? Thomas seemed to hear the question in his silence. Because your father made a deal. What deal? He agreed to disappear if Emma remained safe. Daniel's blood went cold. And now Emma has found you. Thomas's voice became almost gentle, which means the deal is over. Daniel looked at the drawing again. The little girl, the woman she became, the man behind her. And suddenly, Daniel understood the real meaning of every sketch he had made. He hadn't been drawing a woman he had never met. He had been remembering a promise his mother had forced him to forget. A promise to protect Emma. A promise made when they were children. And somewhere in the darkness, outside his apartment, Thomas was waiting to see whether Daniel would keep it. Then Emma called again. Daniel answered. Her voice was trembling. Daniel, what happened? I got away. Daniel's shoulders loosened for half a second. Where are you? I don't know. What do you mean? I'm driving. Where? Emma was silent. Then she whispered, I found a road sign. Daniel's heart began pounding again. What does it say? Morrison Row. Daniel looked toward the door. Thomas was gone, but on the floor outside his apartment, someone had left a single sheet of paper. Daniel picked it up. There was only one sentence. Bring Emma to the old community center, and I'll give you your father back. He drew her face every night before they ever met. The old community center stood at the end of Morrison Row, like a building the city had forgotten. Its windows were boarded. Vines covered the brick walls. The old sign above the entrance hung crookedly from one rusted chain. Daniel parked across the street. Emma remained in the passenger seat, staring at the building. Something about this place feels familiar, she whispered. Daniel looked at her. Me too. He took the old drawing from his pocket. The little girl beneath the maple tree. Emma. He had drawn her when he was 13. Or at least, that was what he believed. Now he wasn't so sure. They crossed the street together. The front door was unlocked. Daniel pushed it open. The hinges groaned. Inside, the air smelled of dust and wet wood. Moonlight entered through gaps in the boarded windows. Thomas, Daniel called. No answer. They walked deeper inside. A long hallway stretched ahead. Daniel stopped. I remember this. Emma looked at him. What? This hallway. He touched the wall. I was here. When? I don't know. A memory flashed. A little girl running ahead. Daniel following. His father shouting his name. Then a door slamming. Daniel grabbed his head. Emma caught his arm. Are you okay? Yeah. He looked down. There was something scratched into the wooden floor. 2 initials. DM. Daniel stared. My initials. Emma knelt beside him. Why would they be here? Daniel didn't answer. Then they heard footsteps. Slow, coming from the room at the end of the hallway. Emma grabbed his hand. Someone's there. Daniel stepped forward. door opened. Thomas stood inside, but he wasn't alone. A man was sitting in a chair near the window. Older, gray-haired, thinner than Daniel remembered. But Daniel knew him immediately. His father, Michael Mercer. Daniel stopped breathing. The world seemed to narrow to that one face. Michael stood. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Michael whispered, "Danny." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. He had imagined this moment thousands of times. His father running toward him. His father apologizing. His father explaining everything. Instead, Daniel stood frozen. "You knew?" Michael nodded. "You've been alive all this time." "Yes." "Why?" Michael looked at Thomas. "Because of him." Thomas stepped forward. "Don't believe everything he tells you." Daniel turned toward him. "You're the one who brought us here. I needed you to see the truth." Michael shook his head. "No." Thomas looked at him. "You still think you're protecting him." "I am. After 19 years. Michael's expression hardened. "Especially after 19 years. Daniel stepped between them. "Enough." Both men looked at him. He looked at his father. "Why didn't you come home?" Michael's face broke. That question hurt more than anything else. "I wanted to." "Then why didn't you?" "Because Thomas knew where you were." Daniel swallowed. "I was 13. I know. You could have found me." "I did." Daniel froze. "What?" Michael reached into his coat. He pulled out a photograph. Daniel recognized it immediately. The same photograph Thomas had shown him. Daniel, his mother, Michael, and Emma. But there was something written on the back. Michael handed it to him. Daniel turned it over. His mother's handwriting covered the paper. "If Daniel ever finds this, tell him I was sorry." Daniel's throat tightened. Michael continued, "Your mother and I made a decision." "What decision?" "We decided that if Thomas ever found out where you were, you would disappear too." Daniel looked at Thomas. "What did you want from me?" Thomas answered, "Nothing." Michael laughed bitterly. "That's a lie." Thomas's expression changed. Michael continued, "Thomas wanted the records." "What records?" "The adoption records, the custody documents, the evidence proving what he did." Daniel looked at Emma. "What did he do?" Thomas said nothing. Michael answered, "He falsified documents. He threatened Emma's mother. He tried to take Emma after losing custody of another child." Emma's face went pale. "And my mother. She ran." Michael looked at Emma. "She took you and disappeared. Then why were you involved?" "Because I helped her." Daniel's voice cracked. "And me." Michael looked at his son. "You were the one person Thomas couldn't control." "Why?" "Because you saw him." Daniel frowned. "Saw what?" "When you were 13, you saw Thomas threaten your mother." A memory struck Daniel. A basement. His mother crying. Thomas shouting. Michael pulling him away. Daniel's breathing became uneven. I remember. Michael nodded. You remembered more than we thought. Daniel looked at the old drawing in his hand. Then why did I keep drawing Emma? Michael's eyes filled with tears. Because I knew you would. Daniel stared at him. What? I gave you that sketchbook. Daniel went completely still. What? The night before I disappeared. Michael's voice trembled. You were asleep. I left it beside your bed. Daniel looked down at the sketchbook. I don't remember. You weren't supposed to. Michael stepped closer. I put the photograph of Emma inside it too. Daniel opened his mouth. Why? Because I knew one day you might forget her. Michael looked at Emma, and I couldn't bear the thought of my son forgetting the little girl he promised to protect. Daniel's eyes filled. So you knew I'd draw her. I hoped you would. All these years. I watched from a distance. Daniel's expression hardened. You watched me. Yes. You saw me grow up. Yes. And you never came home. Michael's voice broke. Every year. Daniel stared at him. Every year what? Every year on your birthday, I came to Portland. Daniel's breathing stopped. I stood outside your building. He looked at Emma. I watched you from across the street. Daniel's face twisted with anger and grief. You were there. Yes. Why didn't you knock? Because the first time I did, Thomas would have known. Daniel stepped closer. You let me believe you were dead. I know. You let me hate you. I know. You let me think you abandoned me. Michael's eyes filled with tears. Because if you hated me, you would stay away from me. Daniel couldn't speak. Michael continued. I thought losing your father was better than losing you. Silence filled the room. Then Emma noticed something. Wait. Everyone turned toward her. She was staring at the wall behind Michael. There was a small metal box built into the brick. Emma pointed. What's that? Michael's face changed. That's what Thomas came here for. Thomas suddenly moved. Daniel stepped in front of the box. Thomas stopped. What is inside? Michael looked at his son. The truth. Daniel opened the box. Inside was a cassette tape, a photograph, and a handwritten note. Daniel unfolded the note. The handwriting was his mother's. Daniel, if you're reading this, your father failed to keep one promise. Daniel's eyes moved to the next line. He promised me he would stay away from you forever. Daniel looked at Michael. Michael lowered his head. Then Daniel read the final sentence. But I never asked him to stop loving you. Daniel's vision blurred. Behind him, Thomas whispered, You don't understand. Daniel turned. No. His voice was calm now. I finally do. He held up the cassette. You didn't bring me here to find my father. Thomas stared at him. You brought me here because you were afraid of what was on this tape. Thomas's face went pale. Daniel looked at Michael, then at Emma, then back at Thomas. And for the first time in 19 years, Daniel wasn't afraid of the man who had haunted his childhood, because now he knew something Thomas had never understood. The boy who had once promised to protect Emma had finally remembered why. And he wasn't 13 anymore. He drew her face every night before they ever met. The man standing near the window didn't move. Daniel stared at him. For 19 years, he had imagined his father's face only from memory. The photograph from his childhood, the smile, the dark hair, the small scar above his eyebrow. But memory had never been enough. Now the man was standing 10 feet away. Older, thinner, gray at the temples, but unmistakably Michael Mercer. Daniel's mouth went dry. "Dad." The man closed his eyes. For 1 second, he looked like he might collapse. Then he nodded. "Daniel." Daniel didn't move. Emma stood beside him, watching silently. Thomas remained near the door. Daniel's voice came out barely above a whisper. "You're alive." Michael nodded. "Yes." "Why?" Michael looked down. "I don't have a good answer." Daniel's expression hardened. "Try." Michael took a slow breath. "I was injured the night everyone thought I died." Daniel stared at him. "The crash?" "Yes." "What really happened?" "I was driving back from Vancouver. I had documents in the car." "What documents?" "Documents that could have put Thomas in prison." Thomas's expression tightened. Daniel looked at him. "Is that true?" Thomas didn't answer. Michael continued. "Thomas knew I had them. He followed you." "Yes." Daniel's stomach tightened. "He tried to force me off the road. So he caused the crash." Michael nodded. "His car hit mine." Daniel looked at Thomas. Thomas finally spoke. "It wasn't supposed to happen that way." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What does that mean?" Thomas said nothing. Michael continued. "The car went over the embankment. I was unconscious. When I woke up, I was badly injured. Then why didn't you call the police?" Michael looked at his son. "Because I believed Thomas would come back." "And he did." Daniel's breathing slowed. Michael's voice became quieter. "I heard him looking through the wreckage." Emma covered her mouth. Michael continued. "He thought I was dead. So you escaped?" "Yes." "Where did you go?" "A hospital under a false name." Daniel frowned. "Why a false name?" "Because I had evidence Thomas wanted." Daniel looked at the metal box. "The documents." Michael nodded. "I knew that if Thomas found me, he'd eventually find your mother and you." Daniel's jaw tightened. "So you disappeared?" "Yes." "You could have contacted me." "I tried." Daniel's expression changed. "What?" "Once. When? When you were 18. Daniel stared at him. "What happened?" "I called your mother's house. She answered." "No." Michael swallowed. "Thomas did." Daniel went completely still. Michael continued. "He told me he knew where you were." Daniel's face went pale. "He said if I came back, you'd be next." Emma reached for Daniel's hand. Michael looked at his son. I believed him. Daniel's eyes filled with anger. So you chose to stay dead. I chose to keep you alive. Those aren't the same thing. Michael lowered his head. I know. The silence was painful. Daniel looked away. For years, he had dreamed about confronting his father. He had imagined shouting. He had imagined forgiveness. He had imagined asking why. But now that the moment had arrived, the only thing he could think about was his childhood bedroom, the empty chair, the birthday cake with one candle, his mother crying after everyone had gone home. You could have sent a letter. I did. Daniel looked at him. What? I sent several. Where are they? Your mother destroyed them. Daniel stared. Why? Because she was afraid you'd look for me. Daniel shook his head. She didn't trust me. No. Michael's voice softened. She loved you too much. Daniel looked at the old sketchbook in his hand. What about Emma? Michael looked at her. I knew you remembered her. How? Because after I disappeared, your mother told me you kept drawing the same girl. Daniel's heart tightened. So the drawings are real memories. Yes, you knew. I knew you had met her, but I didn't remember. You were 13. You saw things that day your mind wasn't ready to understand. Daniel looked at Emma. I remember the tree. Emma smiled through tears. I remember it too. Daniel looked back at Michael. Why did my mother make me forget her? She didn't want you searching for Emma. Because of Thomas. Michael nodded. Thomas believed Emma was his daughter and wanted custody. Emma whispered, but my mother wouldn't let him. She knew what he was capable of. Daniel looked at Thomas. And you. Thomas's expression was unreadable. Michael answered for him. I was trying to help them. Why? Because I loved your mother. Daniel's face tightened. And Emma. Michael looked at Emma. She was a child who needed protecting. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Daniel finally understood. There had been no supernatural connection, no impossible prophecy, no magical reason he knew Emma's face. He had simply loved someone as a child, forgotten her, and spent years unconsciously trying to remember. The drawings weren't predicting anything. They were pieces of a memory, refusing to disappear. Daniel looked at Michael. Why did you come back now? Michael didn't answer. Thomas did. Because I found him. Daniel turned. Thomas continued. I found Michael 6 months ago. Daniel stared. Then why wait? Because I needed something from him. The evidence. Thomas nodded. And because he refused to tell me where it was. Daniel looked at the metal box. That's why you brought us here. Thomas's eyes moved toward the box. Yes. Daniel stepped toward it. What happens if I open it? Thomas looked at Michael. Michael said quietly, then everything changes. Daniel opened the box. Inside was a small USB drive, several photographs, and a folded police report. Daniel picked up the report. His eyes widened. The date was August 14, 2007, the night his father supposedly died. But the report contained something he had never seen. A witness statement. A witness who had seen Thomas's car following Michael. Daniel looked at Thomas. "You didn't kill my father." Thomas said nothing. "But you caused the crash." Still nothing. Michael stepped forward. "I don't want revenge." Daniel looked at him. "Then what do you want?" Michael's eyes filled with tears. "One chance to tell my son the truth." Daniel stared at him. After 19 years, that was all his father wanted. Not forgiveness, not a second life, just the chance to stop being a ghost. Daniel looked at Emma, then back at Michael. "Tell me everything." Michael nodded, and for the first time since Daniel was 13, his father sat beside him. Not as a ghost, not as a memory, just as a broken man who had made one terrible decision, a decision that had cost him 19 years with his son. Outside, rain began tapping against the windows. Daniel opened the police report, and on the final page was one name he hadn't expected to see. His mother's. Underneath, it was a handwritten note. Michael never knew the second part of the plan. Daniel looked up. His father went pale. "What?" Daniel slowly turned the page toward him. "Mom was hiding something from you too." Michael stared at the handwriting. Then he whispered, "Oh God," because whatever Daniel's mother had kept secret, even Michael had never known about it. And suddenly, the mystery wasn't over. It had only become personal. The man standing near the window didn't move. Daniel stared at him. For 19 years, he had carried a picture of his father in his mind. Dark hair, brown eyes, a crooked smile, a small scar above his eyebrow. But memory had changed him over time. The man in front of him was older. His hair was gray. His face was thinner. There were deep lines around his eyes. But Daniel knew him. "Dad." The man closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with tears. Daniel couldn't move. Emma reached for his hand. Thomas remained near the doorway. Daniel finally found his voice. "You're alive." Michael nodded. "Yes, you've been alive for 19 years. Yes." Daniel's expression hardened. "Then start explaining." Michael looked down. "The night of the crash, I wasn't planning to disappear." Daniel frowned. "What happened? I was driving home from Vancouver. I had documents in the car, the evidence against Thomas." "Yes." Michael looked at Thomas. "Thomas knew I had them." Thomas said nothing. Michael continued. "He followed me." Daniel's jaw tightened. "All the way. Almost. What happened? The road was wet. He came up behind me and hit my rear quarter panel." Daniel stared at him. "You said he caused the crash." "I believe he did. Believe. I remember the impact. I remember losing control. After that, I remember nothing." Michael took a breath. "When I woke up, I was in a hospital." Daniel looked at Emma. How a truck driver found my car in the ravine and called 911. That single detail changed everything. There was no mysterious disappearance from a wreck, no impossible survival. Someone had found him. Why wasn't I told? Because by the time you were looking for me, the hospital records had already been changed. Daniel frowned. Changed by who? Michael looked at Thomas. Thomas finally spoke. I didn't change them. Michael shook his head. You didn't have to. Daniel looked between them. Then who did? Michael's voice became quieter. I don't know. That answer surprised Daniel. You don't know? No. Michael looked genuinely troubled. I woke up 3 days later. I had a broken leg, 3 cracked ribs, a concussion, and internal injuries. Emma whispered, How did you get out? I didn't. Daniel looked at her. What? I stayed in the hospital for almost 3 weeks. Daniel stared. Then why didn't anyone find you? Because I wasn't listed as Michael Mercer. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Why? The hospital had registered me under a John Doe name after the crash. Because you didn't have identification. My wallet was gone. Daniel remembered the old police report. His father's wallet had supposedly been found inside the wreck. Michael continued. When I finally woke up properly, I asked for the police. Daniel leaned forward. What happened? They told me there had been no confirmed identification. Michael swallowed. Then someone came to my room. Thomas. No. Michael looked toward the floor. Your mother. Daniel froze. My mother knew you were alive. Yes. How? Because I called her. Daniel's anger softened slightly. What did she say? She cried. Michael's voice cracked. Then she told me something I didn't want to hear. What? Thomas had been asking about you. Daniel went still. Me? Yes. Why? Because you had seen something the night of the crash. Daniel searched his memory. I was 13. I know. What did I see? Michael hesitated. Thomas leaving our house. Daniel's breath caught. You knew. I knew you'd seen him. Then why didn't you come home? Because your mother begged me not to. Daniel stared at him. She wanted you to stay away. She believed Thomas would hurt you if he knew I was alive. And you believed her. I had just survived a crash. Michael gave a tired smile. I wasn't exactly thinking clearly. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Daniel asked, So where did you go? Your mother helped me leave the hospital. How? She brought me clothes, money, and a passport I'd kept hidden for emergencies. Was it fake? No. Michael shook his head. It was an old passport under my middle name. I had never used it. Daniel nodded slowly. Where did you go? Idaho first. Then Montana. Why keep moving? Because every time I started settling somewhere, I worried Thomas would find me. Daniel looked at Thomas. Did he? Not for years. And you never contacted me. Michael lowered his head. I wrote letters. Daniel's expression changed. Mom said you didn't. Your mother asked me not to send them. Why? Because she believed you would try to find me. Daniel laughed bitterly. She was right. Michael looked at him. That's exactly why. Silence. Then Daniel asked the question that hurt the most. Did you ever want to come back? Michael's eyes filled. Every day. Then why didn't you? Because when you were 18, I finally decided I couldn't stay away forever. Daniel stared. What happened? I came to Portland. You were here. Yes. Did you see me? Michael nodded. Once. Daniel's breath caught. Where? Outside your college. Daniel closed his eyes. A memory surfaced. A gray-haired man standing beside a parked sedan. Daniel had noticed him because the man had been staring at him. He had thought nothing of it. That was you. Yes. Why didn't you talk to me? Michael's voice broke. Because Thomas was watching the building. Daniel opened his eyes. What? I saw his car. Michael looked at Thomas. I realized he had found you. Thomas's face remained cold. So you left? Yes. Daniel shook his head. You could have warned me. I thought I was protecting you. You made the decision for me. Michael nodded. I know. That answer hurt more than an excuse would have. Daniel looked down at the old sketchbook. And Emma. Michael looked at her. You remembered her because you knew her. But I didn't remember. You were 13. Your mother wanted you to forget that summer. Why? Because that summer was when everything fell apart. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Michael continued. You promised her you'd come back. Daniel looked at Emma. She nodded. You did. Michael watched them quietly. The drawings were your mind, trying to hold on to something your mother wanted you to forget. Daniel ran his thumb over the first sketch. So there was never anything supernatural. No. Michael gave a faint smile. Just a boy who couldn't forget a promise. Daniel's eyes filled. For 19 years, he had believed the drawings were a curse. Now he understood they were the opposite. They were the part of him that had refused to let Emma disappear. Daniel looked at his father. Why come back now? Michael glanced at Thomas. Because Thomas found me 6 months ago. Daniel stiffened. How? I don't know. And he brought you here. No. Michael shook his head. I came here because I knew you would eventually find the truth. Daniel looked at the metal box. What is inside? Evidence. Against Thomas. Some of it. Michael paused. But there's something else. What? Your mother's final letter. Daniel stared at him. My mother wrote you a letter. Yes. What's in it? Michael looked at Emma. She wanted you to know why she made me stay away. Daniel stepped closer. Tell me. Michael took a folded envelope from inside his coat. It was old. The edges were worn. Daniel recognized the handwriting immediately. His mother's. Michael handed it to him. Daniel stared at the envelope for several seconds before opening it. Inside was one page. Only one. He read the first line, then stopped. His face changed. Emma noticed. "What does it say?" Daniel looked up. His voice was barely a whisper. She knew Thomas wasn't the only person we had to be afraid of. Michael went pale. "I never knew that." Daniel looked back at the letter. His mother's final words were waiting beneath his fingers. And suddenly, Michael's 19-year disappearance was no longer the biggest mystery. It was only the first one. The man standing near the window didn't move. Daniel stared at him. For 19 years, he had imagined his father's face from a single photograph. Dark hair, brown eyes, a crooked smile, a small scar above his eyebrow. But the man standing 10 feet away was older now. His hair was almost completely gray. His face was thinner. There were deep lines around his eyes. Still, Daniel knew him. "Dad." The man's lips trembled. "Daniel." Daniel couldn't move. Emma stood beside him. Thomas remained near the doorway. Daniel finally whispered, "You're alive." Michael nodded. "Yes." "How?" Michael looked down. "The crash didn't kill me." Daniel's eyes narrowed. "What happened?" "I was driving home that night. Thomas was following me." Thomas said nothing. Michael continued. "He hit the back of my car." Daniel looked at Thomas. "You caused the crash." Thomas's jaw tightened. "I wanted him to stop." "Stop what?" "Taking the documents to the police." Daniel looked back at Michael. "What happened after the crash?" "I don't remember much." Michael took a breath. "I remember the car going over the embankment. Then darkness. And then I woke up in a hospital." Daniel stared. "Which hospital?" "St. Vincent's." "Why didn't anyone know?" "Because the paramedics couldn't identify me." Michael touched the scar near his eyebrow. "My wallet was gone. My phone was destroyed. I had a head injury. The hospital registered me as an unidentified patient." Daniel slowly nodded. "That made sense. How long were you there?" 22 days. 22. Yes. Daniel looked at Emma. "Then how did you disappear?" Michael's face became serious. "Your mother found me." Daniel froze. "My mother. She was looking for me." "How?" "One of the nurses recognized my name after I finally remembered it." Michael paused. "Your mother was contacted." Daniel's voice softened. "What did she say?" "She came to the hospital." "What happened?" Michael looked away. "She cried when she saw me." Daniel swallowed. "Then what?" "She told me Thomas had been asking questions. About you. About all of us." Michael's eyes moved to Emma. He knew about her. Emma lowered her eyes. He wanted to find her. Daniel looked at Thomas. "And you?" Thomas said quietly. "I wanted my daughter." Emma's face hardened. "You lost that right." Thomas didn't answer. Michael continued. Your mother believed Thomas would hurt you if he knew I was alive. So you left. Yes. Where? Idaho. Daniel frowned. Why Idaho? I had an old friend there. Michael gave a tired smile. He helped me find work and a place to stay. You changed your name. Not exactly. Daniel looked confused. I used my middle name. Michael. No. Michael hesitated. James. Daniel stared. You lived as James. For years. Was it legal? Yes. Michael looked at him. I wasn't trying to become another person. I was trying not to be found. That distinction mattered. Daniel slowly understood. So you weren't hiding in some secret place. No, I worked. Construction, warehouse work, maintenance, whatever I could find. All those years. Yes. Did you ever leave Idaho? Eventually. Michael looked toward the window. I moved twice. Why? Because every time I heard Thomas had been asking about me, I moved. Daniel shook his head. Why didn't you contact me? Michael's expression broke. I wanted to. That's not an answer. I know. Daniel stepped closer. Did you ever even see me? Michael hesitated. Once. When you were 18. Daniel's heart tightened. Where? Outside your college. Daniel's face changed. A memory came back. A gray-haired man standing beside an old sedan. Daniel had noticed him. The man had looked strangely familiar. Daniel had dismissed it. You were there. Yes. Why didn't you talk to me? Michael's eyes filled with tears. Because I saw Thomas. Daniel stopped. What? He was across the street. Michael swallowed. I hadn't seen him in years. You were afraid. Yes. Of him. Of what he would do if he realized I'd come back. Daniel stared at his father. So you left again. Michael nodded. You made the choice for me. I did. You could have let me decide. I should have. Michael looked down. That's the part I regret most. Daniel didn't answer. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Emma asked, What about the drawings? Michael looked at her. What drawings? Daniel held up the sketchbook. The drawings of Emma. Michael's expression softened. Your mother told me about them. When? Years after I left. Why didn't you tell me? How could I? Daniel looked down. I didn't know you were drawing her. Daniel turned the first page. The little girl beneath the maple tree. Emma. I thought I had never met her. You had. When? Michael looked at Emma. That summer. Emma nodded. I remember. Daniel's eyes moved between them. But why couldn't I remember her? Michael answered carefully. Because your mother wanted you to forget. Why? Because you saw Thomas arguing with her. Daniel's breathing changed. The memory returned in fragments. A basement. His mother's voice. Thomas shouting. Emma crying. Michael pulling Daniel away. Then his mother's face. Terrified, Michael continued, "Your mother thought forgetting would keep you safe." Daniel looked at Emma. "And the drawings. You remembered her face, even after you forgot everything else." Daniel's fingers moved across the paper. "So they weren't predicting anything?" "No." Michael smiled sadly. "They were memories." Daniel closed the sketchbook. "Then why did you come back now?" Michael looked toward Thomas. "Because I thought it was finally safe." Thomas laughed bitterly. "It wasn't." Michael shook his head. "I hadn't heard your name in years." Daniel looked at Thomas. "But he found you 6 months ago." "How?" "I don't know," Thomas answered. "I found him through an old contact." Michael's expression hardened. "And you came here." "I wanted the evidence." Daniel looked at the metal box. "The documents." Michael nodded. "Some of them." Daniel walked toward the box. "What exactly is inside?" "The records that prove what Thomas did." Thomas stepped forward. "Don't open it." Daniel stopped. Thomas's face had changed. For the first time, Daniel saw genuine fear. Not anger, fear. Daniel slowly turned back. "You've been afraid of this box the whole time." Thomas didn't answer. Daniel opened it. Inside was a USB drive, several photographs, and a folded police report. He picked up the report. The date was August 14, 2007, the night his father supposedly died. Daniel read the witness statement. His eyes widened. Someone had seen Thomas's car following Michael before the crash. He looked at Thomas. "You caused it." Thomas remained silent. Daniel looked at Michael. "And you survived." Michael nodded. "But you didn't come home." "No." "Why?" Michael's eyes filled with tears. "Because I was afraid." Daniel waited. Michael finally said the thing he had never been able to admit. "I was afraid that if I came home, you'd lose more than a father." Daniel's expression softened. "What do you mean?" "Your mother had already lost everything." Michael looked at Emma. Emma had already lost her father. Then he looked at Daniel. "I couldn't risk making you lose your life too." Daniel swallowed. "You should have trusted me." "I know." Michael's voice broke. "I spent 19 years knowing that." Daniel looked at his father. For 19 years, he had imagined Michael as either a hero or a coward. Now he realized he was neither. He was simply a father who had made a decision out of fear and lived with it. Michael looked at the sketchbook. "There's one thing I never understood." "What?" "Why did you keep drawing her?" Daniel looked at Emma, then at the first drawing. "Maybe because some promises don't disappear just because you forget making them." Emma's eyes filled with tears. Michael smiled faintly. "Your mother would have liked that answer." Daniel looked at him. Then something caught his attention. A folded piece of paper beneath the police report. He pulled it free. The handwriting stopped him. His mother's. Daniel read the first sentence. "Michael, if Daniel ever finds you, there is something you must tell him." Michael's face went pale. Daniel looked up. "You've never seen this." Michael shook his head. "No." Daniel unfolded the rest. His mother's final message contained only 6 words. Thomas was not working alone. The room went completely silent. Thomas looked toward the door, and for the first time since Daniel had met him again, Thomas looked genuinely afraid, because whoever had helped him in 2007 was still out there, and Daniel had just found the first proof. He drew her face every night before they ever met. Daniel stared at his father. The room felt too small for everything that had just been revealed. Michael was alive. His father was alive. The man Daniel had mourned since he was 13 was standing 10 feet away, breathing, looking at him with the same eyes Daniel had spent 19 years trying to forget. Daniel should have been happy. Instead, he was furious. "You knew where I was." Michael nodded. "Yes, you knew I was alive. Yes, you knew my mother told me you were dead." Michael lowered his eyes. "Yes." Daniel laughed once. It wasn't a happy sound. "Then you don't get to say you're sorry." Michael looked up. "I know." "No." Daniel stepped closer. "You don't know." Michael remained silent. "You don't know what it was like." Daniel's voice cracked. "You don't know what it was like to be 13 and watch everyone around you whisper." Michael swallowed. "You don't know what it was like to sit in school and hear other kids talk about their fathers." Daniel's eyes filled with tears. "You don't know what it was like when Father's Day came." Michael closed his eyes. Daniel kept going. "I hated that day." His voice shook. "I hated every stupid card they made us draw." Michael's face tightened. "I remember standing there while everyone wrote something about their dads." Daniel wiped his eyes angrily. "And I had nothing." Michael whispered, "Daniel." "No." Daniel pointed at him. "You don't get to interrupt me." Michael nodded. Daniel breathed through the anger. "I came home and asked Mom, what kind of man leaves his family?" Michael's eyes filled. "What did she say?" "She said you didn't leave." Daniel laughed bitterly. "She said you died." Michael looked away, and I believed her. Daniel stepped closer. "I believed you were dead." Michael nodded. "Every year." Daniel's voice became quieter. "Every birthday." Michael couldn't look at him. "Every Christmas." Daniel swallowed. "Every time I got sick, I wondered if you would have known what medicine to buy." Michael's eyes closed. "Every time I got something right, I wondered if you'd have been proud." A tear rolled down Michael's cheek. Daniel saw it, and somehow that made him angrier. "Don't cry." Michael looked at him. "Don't." Daniel's voice broke. "You don't get to cry because you feel guilty." Michael nodded. "You're right. You don't get to feel like the victim." "I'm not. You disappeared." "I know. You made me bury you." "I know. You let me grow up thinking my father was dead." "I know." Daniel stared at him, then tell me why. Michael took a long breath. Because I was afraid. Daniel froze. Michael continued. Not only of Thomas. Daniel's expression changed. What does that mean? It means I was afraid to come home. Why? Because I didn't know what would happen. Michael looked at his son. I had spent years convincing myself that staying away was the brave thing to do. His voice trembled, but sometimes I was just scared. Daniel stared at him. You were scared of coming back to your own son. Yes, the honesty hit harder than an excuse. Michael continued. I was afraid you'd hate me. Daniel's eyes filled again. You should have let me. Michael nodded. I should have. I might have hated you. I know. I might have forgiven you. I know. I might have needed you. Michael's face collapsed. That's what I was most afraid of. Daniel stopped. What? That you'd need me. Michael wiped his face. Because then I'd have to admit that I had chosen to stay away. Silence. Daniel looked at the floor. For the first time, he understood. His father's greatest fear hadn't been Thomas. It had been Daniel. Not because Daniel was dangerous. Because Daniel was proof of everything Michael had lost. Daniel whispered, You were a coward. Michael nodded. Yes. The word hung between them. No argument. No excuse. Just acceptance. Daniel looked at him. Say it again. Michael's voice broke. I was a coward. Daniel's tears finally fell. You should have come home. I know. You should have knocked on the door. I know. You should have let me decide whether I wanted you. I know. Daniel shook his head. I spent 19 years thinking you didn't want me. Michael stepped closer. I wanted you every single day. That doesn't matter. Michael stopped. Daniel wiped his face. Wanting me isn't the same as being there. Michael nodded. No, it isn't. I know. Daniel stared at his father. Then something inside him broke. Not anger. Something older. Something he had carried since he was 13. He whispered, I needed you. Michael's face crumpled. Daniel looked away. I needed you so badly. Michael covered his mouth. Daniel continued. I used to dream that you'd come back. His voice became almost childlike. I'd wake up thinking I heard your truck. Michael cried silently. I'd run to the window. Daniel laughed through his tears. And every time, there was nobody there. Michael couldn't speak. Daniel looked at him again. Do you understand what you did to me? Michael nodded. No. Daniel shook his head. You don't. He stepped forward. You didn't just disappear. He pointed toward his own chest. You left me with the question of whether I was worth staying for. Michael looked devastated. Daniel, and I spent years answering that question for you. Michael whispered, What did you answer? Daniel looked at him. That I wasn't. Michael's face changed completely. No, you don't get to say no. You were always worth staying for. Then why didn't you? Michael couldn't answer. Daniel waited. Finally, Michael whispered, I don't know. That was the answer Daniel had been waiting 19 years to hear. Not a conspiracy, not a heroic explanation, not another excuse, just the painful truth. His father didn't know how to face what he had done. Daniel looked away. Emma quietly stepped closer. Michael noticed her. I'm sorry. Emma looked at him. For what? For leaving you too. Emma shook her head. You didn't leave me. Michael looked confused. My mother told me the truth before she died. What truth? That you were the reason I survived. Michael's eyes widened. Emma continued. She said you gave her the money to leave Thomas. Michael nodded slowly. I had to. She said you protected me. I tried. She said you loved me. Michael looked down. I did. Emma smiled sadly. Then maybe you weren't the monster I thought you were. Michael looked at Daniel. Daniel wasn't ready to say the same thing. Not yet. He looked at the old sketchbook in his hand, then at his father. I don't forgive you. Michael nodded. I understand. But Daniel hesitated. Michael waited. I don't want to lose you again. Michael's eyes filled with tears. You won't. Daniel looked at him. Don't promise that. Michael nodded. You're right. Daniel took a slow breath. If you're going to be my father again, don't promise me forever. Michael looked at him. Then what do I promise? Daniel's voice was quiet. Tomorrow. Michael smiled through his tears. Tomorrow. Daniel nodded. Then the day after that. Michael stepped closer. Okay. Daniel finally allowed his father to hug him. It wasn't the reunion either of them had imagined. There was no dramatic forgiveness, no sudden healing. Daniel's arms remained stiff at first. Then slowly, they moved around Michael. Michael held his son like he was afraid the moment might disappear. Daniel closed his eyes. For 19 years, he had imagined what it would feel like to have his father back. He had never imagined that it would hurt, but it did, because getting something back didn't erase the years without it. And as Michael held him, Daniel realized something else. His father had come back, but the 13-year-old boy, who had spent 19 years waiting for him, was still inside him. And that boy wasn't ready to forgive. He was only ready to stop waiting. Daniel stared at his father. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Then Daniel said, You knew. Michael nodded. Yes, you knew I was alive. Yes, you knew where I lived. For some of the years, Daniel's jaw tightened, and you stayed away. Michael stepped forward. I had to. No, I did. You chose to. Michael's expression changed. Yes, Daniel laughed bitterly. Finally, Michael took a breath. But you're not going to understand why, unless you let me explain. I've had 19 years to imagine why. Then let me tell you what actually happened. Daniel folded his arms. Go ahead. Michael looked at Thomas. That night, I wasn't running away from my family. Thomas stared back. I was trying to protect them. Daniel immediately interrupted. By disappearing, by making Thomas believe I was dead. You weren't dead. I know that now. Daniel stared. What does that mean? Michael's voice became strained. After the crash, I didn't know what was happening. I woke up in a hospital 3 days later. I couldn't remember my name. Daniel said nothing. I had a fractured leg, 3 broken ribs, a head injury. I didn't even know what day it was. Michael touched his temple. When the doctors finally got my memory back, I asked for my wife. Mom, yes. Did they contact her? I called her myself, and she came. She did. Michael's eyes softened. She was terrified. Of Thomas. Of everything. Michael continued. She told me Thomas had been asking where you were. Daniel frowned. You were already presumed dead. Thomas didn't believe it. Why? Because he knew I had the documents. What documents? Proof that he had been threatening Emma's mother. Emma looked at Thomas. Michael continued. He wanted those documents destroyed. Daniel's voice sharpened. So you had evidence? Yes. And you were afraid he'd come after me. Exactly. Daniel shook his head. Then why didn't you go to the police? I tried. What happened? Michael hesitated. I couldn't. Why? Because someone had already gotten into the evidence room. Daniel stared. What? The files were gone. Thomas finally spoke. Because the police were never going to believe you. Michael turned toward him. You don't get to rewrite this. Thomas's expression hardened. Michael looked back at Daniel. I knew someone was helping Thomas. Who? I didn't know. So you ran. I took your mother's advice. Daniel shook his head. You keep saying that. Because it's true. But you were the adult. Michael flinched. Yes. You were my father. Yes. You should have made the decision. I did. You decided to leave me. I decided to keep you alive. Daniel stepped closer. Stop saying that. Michael stopped. Daniel's voice broke. Stop turning it into some heroic sacrifice. Michael stared at him. You think I don't know what it cost? You don't get to use the word sacrifice after leaving me for 19 years. It wasn't 19 years by choice. Michael's voice suddenly rose. Daniel froze. Michael breathed heavily. I didn't wake up one morning and decide I didn't want my son. His eyes filled. I wanted to come home. Then why didn't you? Because every time I got close, something happened. Michael pointed toward Thomas. Every time I thought it was safe, he appeared again. Daniel shook his head. Then you should have found another way. I tried. Michael's voice echoed through the room. I sent letters. Mom never gave them to me. I know. I called. Your mother stopped answering. Then you should have come. I almost did. Daniel stared. Michael's voice dropped. When you were 18, Daniel remembered. The college. Michael nodded. I saw you. You were there. Yes. Why didn't you come to me? Michael's face tightened. Because Thomas was watching you. You don't know that. I saw him. You could have been wrong. I wasn't. Daniel stared at him. Michael continued. He was sitting across the street. Daniel's anger softened slightly. He knew you were there. I don't know. Then why leave? Because I had spent 5 years trying to keep him from finding you. Michael took a breath. I couldn't risk walking up to you and bringing him straight to your door. Daniel looked away. Michael continued. And yes, he swallowed. There was another reason. Daniel looked back. What? Michael's eyes filled with tears. I was ashamed. Daniel said nothing. I was ashamed of what I had become. Michael touched his chest. I had no home, no job worth talking about, no money, no family. You had me. I know. Michael's voice broke. And that's why I couldn't face you. Daniel's expression changed. You were ashamed to face your son. Yes, because you were poor. Because I had failed. Michael wiped his face. I told myself I was protecting you. He paused, but part of me was hiding because I didn't know how to stand in front of you and admit that I had lost everything. Daniel stared at him. That answer felt different. It wasn't heroic. It wasn't clean. It was human. Michael continued. I thought if you believed I was dead, you could build a life without waiting for me. Daniel's voice was quiet. I never stopped waiting. Michael looked at him. I know that now. You didn't know then. No. Daniel shook his head. That's the problem. Michael nodded. You're right. Daniel looked at Thomas. Was he really the reason? Michael answered immediately. Partly. Daniel looked back. Partly. Michael hesitated. Thomas was dangerous. I believe that. But he wasn't the only reason. Daniel waited. Michael finally said, I was afraid. Daniel's eyes narrowed. Of Thomas. Of losing you. Daniel frowned. That doesn't make sense. It does to me. Michael's voice became quieter. If I came back and failed again, you'd have lost your father twice. Daniel stared at him. So you decided I was better off losing you once. Michael nodded. Yes. Daniel laughed sadly. That was your decision. Yes. And you were wrong. Michael's eyes filled. Yes. The room fell silent. Daniel looked at his father. For 19 years, he had wanted an explanation. Now he had one. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't noble. It wasn't even completely logical. It was a frightened man making the best decision he could with the information he had, and making the wrong one. Daniel finally whispered, I needed you. Michael's face broke. I know. No. Daniel stepped closer. You know now. Michael nodded. I do. I needed you when I was 13. I know when I was 16. I know when I graduated. Michael closed his eyes. I know when I turned 21. A tear rolled down Michael's cheek. I know. Daniel's voice cracked. And every time you weren't there, I told myself you didn't want to be. Michael stepped forward. I wanted you more than anything. Then you should have come. I should have. Daniel looked at him. I don't forgive you. Michael nodded. I don't expect you to, but I want to understand you. Michael's eyes lifted. Daniel continued. That's different. Michael swallowed. That's enough. Daniel looked at the man, who had been a ghost for 19 years. Then he said, Start from the beginning. Michael nodded, and this time, he didn't try to make himself the hero. He told Daniel everything. The crash, the hospital, the missing evidence, the threats, the years alone, the letters that never reached their destination. The day he saw Daniel at college and walked away. And finally, the truth Michael had spent 19 years refusing to say aloud. He hadn't only been protecting Daniel. He had also been protecting himself from the unbearable pain of discovering whether his son could ever forgive him. Daniel listened. He didn't forgive him that night, but for the first time in 19 years, he finally knew why his father had disappeared. And sometimes, the truth doesn't heal the wound. It simply gives you the courage to stop blaming yourself for having it. Final part. The face he never forgot. Michael finished speaking. For several seconds, nobody moved. The old community center was silent, except for rain tapping against the broken windows. Daniel looked down at the sketchbook in his hands. For years, he had believed those drawings were a warning, a curse, something he was supposed to understand, but never could. Now he knew the truth. They were memories, memories of a little girl beneath a maple tree, a promise made before either of them understood what promises meant. Daniel looked at Emma. She was crying quietly. He smiled. I remember now. Emma wiped her cheek. What? The first time I saw you. Her lips trembled. You remember. You were hiding behind the tree. Emma smiled through her tears. You told me I was terrible at hiding. Daniel laughed softly. I did. You said my shoes were sticking out. They were. For the first time that night, everyone laughed. Even Michael. It was a small laugh, but it felt like something broken had finally begun to heal. Thomas stood near the doorway. Daniel looked at him. What happens now? Thomas looked toward the evidence box. The police get everything. Michael nodded. I'd agree. Thomas didn't resist. Perhaps he finally understood that the years of running were over. Daniel walked toward Emma. He held out his hand. She took it. Then he looked at Michael. Come with us. Michael looked surprised. Are you sure? No. Daniel smiled faintly. But I'm tired of being afraid. Michael nodded. They walked out of the community center together. The rain had stopped. The streets reflected the yellow glow of the lamps. Daniel looked up at the sky. For 19 years, he had carried an empty space where his father should have been. Tonight, that space wasn't empty anymore. It was complicated, painful, unfinished, but real, and maybe that was enough. Months later, Daniel moved into a small house outside Portland. Emma lived nearby. Michael visited every Sunday. At first, their conversations were awkward. They talked about ordinary things: coffee, weather, movies, work. Sometimes they sat together without speaking. Daniel didn't rush forgiveness. Michael didn't ask for it. He simply kept showing up. Every Sunday, just as he had promised. One afternoon, Daniel opened the old sketchbook again. The pages were filled with drawings of Emma. Her face at 8, her face at 26, her smile, her eyes, the maple tree, the old community center, and finally, one last drawing. Daniel had drawn it that morning. It showed 3 people standing beneath a maple tree: Michael, Emma, and Daniel. He looked at it for a long time. Then Emma walked into the room. "You're still drawing me." Daniel smiled. Apparently, she sat beside him. "Can I see?" He handed her the sketchbook. Emma studied the final drawing. "You left something out." "What?" She pointed at the corner. "There's supposed to be one more person." Daniel looked at her. "Who?" She smiled. "The 13-year-old you." Daniel laughed. "I don't think he'd fit. He belongs there." Daniel looked at the drawing again. She was right. The boy who had made the promise. The boy who had spent years searching for a face he couldn't explain. The boy who had believed he had been abandoned. He belonged there too. Daniel added a small figure beneath the tree. Then he closed the sketchbook. Emma rested her head against his shoulder. "Do you still dream about me?" Daniel smiled. "Sometimes." "What do you dream?" "The same thing." "What?" He looked at her. "You sitting beneath the tree." Emma smiled. "And what happens?" "I find you." She closed her eyes. Every time. Daniel kissed her forehead. Every time. Outside, the evening light moved slowly across the yard. For years, Daniel had drawn Emma because some forgotten part of him was trying to return to the past. Now he no longer needed to. He had found her. He had found his father. And somewhere along the way, he had finally found the frightened 13-year-old boy who had spent half his life wondering whether anyone would ever come back for him. Someone had. Not exactly when he wanted. Not in the way he imagined. But they had come back. Daniel opened the sketchbook one final time and looked at the first drawing. The little girl beneath the maple tree. He smiled. Then he turned the page and began drawing the life that came next.